Hello, community. Welcome. Bienvenue à Kwaba No at Nonviolence with Roberta. In this space, we'll contemplate and explore nonviolence and the breakdown of its facets. We'll learn together and grow together in our understanding of nonviolence as a concept and how we can live it out daily in contemporary times. We will take the time to contemplate our own experiences alongside experiences of our forebearers, relating them to the now and our own do somethingness in the now, like Dr. King would ask. It's our role to grow better each day, to acknowledge our human rights and the freedoms and responsibility that come with these. So thank you again for joining me this week. This week, I'd like us to think of examples in our lives of commitment and nonviolence. And this week, the theme of this little share session is in search of an example. And thinking about it, the examples, imperfect as they are, of nonviolence articulated in our lives, with the individuals we've grown with and that we know, or that we've studied, heard, and read about, or that we respect, appreciate, or even distantly observe and admire, are examples we can call to mind on a day-to-day basis. Personally, in memoriam, a recent recognition of one of my favorite examples, my late father, Ralph Opara Sr., and a recent privilege to share a written piece, which I shared on the theme of nonviolence, democracy, and nation building. It was heartwarming for me to represent the family during that occasion of members of the community that came to not just remember my dad, but put to use his own insights and his own use of the media and his own being a person of the media to advance tenets that lead to good governance and freedoms for people. Well, at this gathering of Nigerians in the diaspora and in Nigeria, and in the discussion of democracy, the dearth of transparency and good governance, and the endemic use of violence in the electoral processes in Nigeria, after important acknowledgements, extended thanks to the organizers and recognition of the many and varied attendees at that event who very warmly expressed appreciation for my dad's work and knowing him. And they came together to celebrate his legacy. I went on to share opening remarks on my family's behalf, and the excerpt of which I'm delighted to reshare with you this week as we think about examples of lived commitment and nonviolence in our own lives. So from my opening remarks, I have an excerpt, which I'll just go ahead and share. As a family, we both tearfully and lovingly remember in humble acknowledgement of the 2 decades since our father's passing, almost unbelievable. And like each of you who has lost a loved one, a friend, sibling, parent, child, or spouse, and has picked up the pieces to strengthfully advance into one tomorrow after the other, we lean heavily on tenets of our faith and the daily commitment to emulating my father's life's values of love, creativity, character, discipline, and above all, integrity. Much like today's luminous gathering astutely bemoans our beloved country, Nigeria, the losses of structural integrity and transparency, and it condemns the malaise of impunity and advocates for a higher vigilance for enshrining the integral standards of a truly egalitarian society. We need not only the tools of faith, advocacy, and commitment, but also of peaceable, active, direct action. In other words, the tool of nonviolence as a force for good and an indispensable tool of social action and change. Instrumental to this is the clarity and regrounding of the tenets held true by this organization, referring to the organization that that put together the memorial event. Tenets as brotherhood and sisterhood, human rights, social justice, and the outright condemnation of violence in all its forms, economically, emotionally, or spiritually, manifest internally or in its external physical forms, forms all of which my father would outrightly condemn in all of those forms. Why? Because, as Gandhi would say, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. And those who live by the sword die by the sword. For violence begets violence, and even while the response to nonviolence might temporarily be more violent, we see that in the end, even in the functioning but imperfect yet admired democracies around the world, the walk to that hill of democratic freedoms and rights was and is fraught with struggle and a historical account of great violence and deeper suffering. Nonviolence begets violence because the reaction of fear, anger, and loss of control is an outlash. And the turn up of the vice, state devices and voices to stymie and to control, and those vices can only grip for so long. Ask the people of Burma, Myanmar, the Philippines, and even Rwanda. It takes a whole commitment to the self, of the self to the exercise and practice of nonviolence. Nonviolence necessarily begets violence in its unfolding as a force, excuse me, as a force for social change. Ask the men, women, and children who walked with and supported India's Gandhi on the Salt March, or in the United States, the adults risking all for the March for Voting Rights. Ask the children of Birmingham, Alabama in the 1950s. Ask the South African voters who elected Nelson Mandela in the 90s, and ask brothers and sisters felled in October 2020 at the Lekki Bridge in Lagos, Nigeria. Even ask the separated and suffering citizens of Ukraine today. Violence is fueled by hate. Excuse me, I'm getting so emotional over this, but violence is fueled by hate, anger, fear, greed, and the solid, excuse me. Violence is fueled by hate, anger, fear, greed, and the soul suffering the need for absolute control. Yet, a persistence on the path of nonviolence must be fueled by immovable discipline and an unwavering commitment. The pen is mightier than the sword, and my father believed and lived it. Informing his people and educating the masses, in his selfless commitment to giving voice to news, information, and education, he lived each day three critical steps in Kingian nonviolence, which are information gathering, education, and personal commitment. These fueled his informed actions. So is this gathering in extolling the voices that can inform, educate, advocate, question, and simultaneously provoke and challenge not only the out there larger society, but each of us as individual parts of this whole integrous Nigeria we seek to build. As the scholarly speakers of today's events will articulate, the tenet of power imposition and disdain for the voice and the vote of the people can be tackled by the dispel of disinformation and the direct challenge of the intransigent. With the tools that we have and those we can learn, in the empowerment of the people, in knowledge of their rights, and the redemptive power of the vote, we must believe that it counts for something. Direct and vocal action, such as public protests and demonstrations, is but one in the over 190 means of nonviolent social action. And we must applaud you all gathered today for digging deep into that well of possible channels through education, advocacy, awareness raising, and social engagement. The path of nonviolence is the path of most resistance. Ask Gandhi Ji of India, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, Malala Yousafzai of Pakistan, and our very own Ken Saro-Wiwa, and most notably Dr. King of United States. In the journey to independence and the dispel of forces of discrimination and voter suppression, the pursuit of voter information and registration, liberty of the voter, and freedom to the ballot, The experiences of fledgling and nascent democracies around the world reflect the commitment to nonviolence around that path and windy road to an egalitarian society and true democracy. Let us not grow weary in the good fight, but let us also remember that the fight is not one of physical weapons in war, but is the committed pursuit of truth, courage, and justice in the educational, social, and economic emancipation of our people. That's a commitment my father made in his lifetime, and one we are called to make in ours as part of the legacy for all generations to come. Thank you, dear community, for allowing me share a part of the piece from that event here with you, and forgive my emotions overcoming my words earlier on. But truly, the message as we think of and we search for examples that can help us and strengthen us in living a life committed to nonviolence, let's not grow weary in the good fight. And let's courageously look to those examples, known and celebrated and unknown, but just as powerfully influential in our lives, to keep us committed to the path, a path of nonviolence fueled by immovable discipline and an unwavering commitment. Without a doubt, let's think about that. Thank you for listening and for your steadfast commitment day to day, and for doing what you can in the moment to remember and support the citizens of Ukraine. Have a great week, everybody, and see you next time. Bye.